Hey everyone, today we're taking a look at Survival from Doom and Bloom LLC. In fact, I think the name of the game is Doom and Bloom Survival. And this is basically a competitive game that takes place in a post-apocalyptic world that does not involve zombies. Go figure. This one instead, like a super flu, has decimated the world's population and you are among the very few survivors. And you're trying to take your ragtag band of survivors and go out, scout a new place to live, basically, that has lots of resources. But in order to do that, you have to search around, get a bunch of resources, go back to the current base that you're living at, and pack everyone up and go to your new living place. And of course, the other players in the game represent other factions who are trying to do the same exact thing before you do. So it's kind of like a race mixed with survival. There's some other things to it. Let's go ahead and do an overview of the game, then we're going to come back and I'll tell you what I think. Alright, I'm just going to give a brief overview of Doom and Bloom Survival. The theme of the game is that it's a post-apocalyptic world that's been ravaged by a super disease, and you are each player represents one of the last bands of survivors, and you're starting off in this central city area here called Center City. And you have to spread out and meet different objectives by going to other cities, acquiring a bunch of resources, going back to Center City, then going back to your final destination, which will be your new home for your survivors. But you can't do that until you have a lot of resources gathered together. This is a competitive game, so it's from 2 to 4 players, and you're trying to meet this objective of getting to your new home before the other players do. If you're the first person to do that, then you win the game. Now, at the start of the game, everyone's going to get randomly one of these different starting survivor cards, which are basically going to dictate sort of what your starting resources are. That's basically all that they do. Also, on the other side of the card, after everyone's chosen, everyone will take one of the extra survivors just as a little cheat sheet on the other side. And so you have your name and basically what they are. Cleric is just Rex Rainmaker, and Amy Alton, RN, is the nurse, and Liana Lee is an engineer, and you have the doctor, and the soldier, and the farmer, the police, and the hunter. And they all have these different resource indicators here that are actually, these first three are specifically resources, and then you have these other assets down here, which are, so you have food, fuel, guns or weaponry, survivors, and then med kits. And you're going to indicate all this with a player board that each player gets. You have these different tracks here. I know they're kind of hard to see, but these will basically indicate, you'll move these little glass beads up and down the track to indicate how many resources you have at a certain point. Also, you can actually use resources for different effects during the course of the game, which I'll mention later. And as you move up the survivor track, if you get certain numbers of survivors, you're actually going to get special bonuses as well. Now, there's this other spot down here on the bottom of your player board, which is actually going to be giving you your objectives for the game. At the start of the game, each player is going to take this little baggie here, and inside the bag, you have different tokens that correspond to these cities that are around the corner of the board, like Haven and Barterville and Prosperity Town and Canaan. So each player will take a turn drawing one of these tokens from the bag, and that will indicate one of the destinations that you have to go to. You'll take a corresponding token corresponding to that, and of course each player can have the same city. It's very possible, and you'll put one of those tokens there. Now, if you're playing a longer game, you're going to do this a total of either 2 or 3 times, depending on how long you want the game to be. You'll put these tokens here face side up, and that will be your destinations for the end of the game. You're going to leave the final spot closed until the end. And your goal basically then is to move out of the center city and try to get as many resources as possible and get to and search and scout these different destination locations that you chose at the beginning of the game. Everything in this game revolves around these different decks of cards here: events, attacks, and these bonus cards. Whenever you're trying to get resources off the board, you're going to have to draw an event card. But first you have to move out, and that's very simply just rolling one of the dice, and of course this is a roll and move game. Surprise! And that, depending on how far you go, that's how far you're going to get to move out of the center city. Everyone starts in the center city, so you can move out in any of the directions that you want to and move that many spots. Now, it's kind of hard to see, but out here on the board, there's little indicators that match up to all the different resources on your board. So if you land on one of these empty spots, that's nothing. You don't have to have any kind of encounter whatsoever. But you land on a spot with the resource, you can draw one of the event cards and try to resolve whatever happens. And it's basically just doing whatever the card tells you to do. So is anybody out there, if no other player has fewer survivors than you, then you simply gain whatever the board asset is. If it refers to the board asset, it's whatever the token, the little indicator is out there. So if it's fuel, you'll gain fuel. Plus you may gain something extra. So in this case, 2 extra survivors. If that is not the case, then you gain nothing. There's nothing you can do about that. Other examples, this one has you rolling dice. So you find a pile of crates, roll 5 dice. If the combined total of those dice, and by the way, just to make it clear in case I wasn't before, all of these dice only have 1, 2, or 3 on it. But in this particular case, if you roll 7 or higher by rolling 5 dice, you gain whatever the board asset is. If you fail, gain nothing. Let's see. Here you go, delayed gratification. Skip your next turn. That's fun. And immediately gain the board asset plus those 3 other resources. Or you lose one of your choice. Whenever you see that symbol, it's lose one of your choice. This one has you rolling 9 or higher to gain the board asset. This one says 12 or higher. But if you get it, you get the board asset and some extra stuff as well. So that's basically how the events work. Now, what about those attack cards? Well, you see out here on the board, there's these like red, orange spaces. If you travel into one of those territories and you're trying to get the board asset, then you have to draw an attack card. And the attack card is usually much rougher. So for instance, this one says, right off the bat, lose 2 survivors, no matter what. And then you have to roll 5 dice 3 times. 10 or higher, if you roll 10 or higher every time, you get the board asset and a bunch of bonus stuff, including bonus cards, which I'll get to in a moment. Attacks by 14 raiders, roll 5 dice. If you get 14 or higher, which is really hard, you gain the board asset plus a bunch of extra stuff. But if you lose 3 of your resources, which is really devastating, let me tell you. All clear, gain the board asset. That's pretty boring. Attacked by 11 raiders, so you have to roll an 11 or higher. That's basically how the attack cards work. So what are these bonus cards that those are referencing? Bonus cards are basically things that you get to keep in front of you, play on your turn, and we'll just do random things. Like swap one of your unscouted destination discs with a disc of your choice from the supply. Plan B, play this card after you draw an event card or an attack card. Basically just draw another one. Out of gas, choose one other player. That player must skip their turn. That's a tremendous amount of fun for that player. Camouflage, gain the board asset if there is one. Do not draw an attack card. So just a lot of extra bonus things to help you along through the game. Now, let's go back and talk about the different number of assets that you have to have for the board. I realize I probably should have mentioned that. So depending on the length of the game that you're playing, not just does that determine how many places you have to scout, but it also determines how many different assets you have, which is going to be indicated here. So you see that for a short game, you have to have 10 food, 10 fuel, 10 guns, 12 survivors, 4 medkits, and it only goes up from there. That's a tremendous amount of stuff to have. So you have to continually go scouting around the board, trying to get as many assets as possible and resources. But of course, if you go to one of the city spaces, which you're going to have to go to anyways, then you have the chance of getting even more and better stuff from those spots. And also, of course, this is your opportunity to actually scout them and get one step closer to victory. If you go to one of the city spaces, you get to, by the way, these standees all correspond to your character cards, but the bases are colored bases that you can interchange out. I don't really see the point in them, but okay. And you go to one of these city spots, have an event card. If you succeed at the event, not only do you get the resources there, but you get to flip over one of your scouting discs to the completed side, and huzzah, you're one step closer to victory. If you fail, well, you just stay there and keep rolling until you succeed. It gets a little worse, however, when you get back to the center city spot. Well, first what you have to do is go and scout. Once you've scouted all of your different areas, whether it's 1, 2, or 3, then you get to go back to center city. And what do you do when you get to center city? Resolve another event. Actually, I think you have to resolve an attack card. Either way, resolve that card. If you do it successfully, then you get to go to one more spot, which means you have to draw another token from the bag and put it into your final destination spot, even if it's one of the same places you've already been to. In that case, you must go back to that final destination spot with all of the resources that you should have in order to win the game, whatever it says on the sheet for whatever length game you're playing. If you have all those resources, you're allowed to go into that final destination city and have a shot at completing an event or an attack. I can't remember which one, doesn't matter, and because they're all the same, and resolve whatever it is. And if you succeed before everyone else does, you win the game. If you fail, well, you'll just have to try again. But if in failing you actually lose resources that you would need in order to complete the game, you have to vacate the city immediately and go out and get more resources. And there's some other stuff I didn't talk about. Like you can go to these different hospital areas once per game, or you can go to them, but then you can't go to that same one again unless you go to a different one. And that's basically the game. You're just running around trying to get as many resources and assets as possible, trying to get to complete that set that you need to beat the game before the rest of your opponents do, and try to survive all the different setbacks that you encounter. That is the essence of survival. Survival has a lot going for it. Now, I didn't really mention this in my intro, but this is actually supposed to be a prototype copy of the game. The game is currently on Kickstarter, but really, I don't think that it is, or there's very few things that are probably going to change, because the components are actually very nice. You know, nice heavy cardboard on the board itself. The card stock is good. The little, it uses standees, but what are you going to do about that? I don't expect every game to have miniatures like a Cool Mini or Not game. So the artwork's cool. It's not really my style, but it's that kind of semi-realistic, like CGI looking art, like Resident Evil style artwork. So that's okay. I don't have any problem with that. And the graphic design is good as well. The board looks very, very busy, but once you figure out the rules of the game and start playing, it's all very simple. Everything sort of clicks together. So component-wise and the artwork and design-wise, it's a pretty solid game. Now, as far as the theme, I mean, I enjoy the fact that it takes place in post-apocalyptica without any kind of zombies involved. I actually like zombie games and things like that, but it's nice for a change of pace. And the game sort of centers it more on interactions with the other players and dealing with humans, so it adds a little bit more realism to it. Now, having said all that, gameplay-wise, I do not enjoy this game at all, and nor did any of the people that I played with. I played 2.5 games of this, really. I tried to play on the novice difficulty setting and the more advanced settings, which, as I mentioned in my overview, just means that you're going to more locations. You have to go to more of these destinations in order to get supplies before you head back. That's all it is. Just kind of lengthens the game. And it didn't seem to matter. As a matter of fact, I would say that one of the big problems with this game is that it is very, very long, no matter which setting that you play on. Even on the novice difficulty, you're still looking at least 90 minutes. That was our experience, at least. That was what 2 of the games that I played in was at. And then in the third one, we were going to do the long one, and we just said, enough already. I think I've given this game enough of my time. It's sad to say, because it does feel like they're squandering the theme here, but this game is the very definition of a random dice fest. It is so hard in this game to feel like you're progressing anywhere. You go to these different locations and you're trying to get these resources. Okay, great. And I kind of like that. I kind of like how you go to these different spots, you can have the chance of getting these different types of resources. But the cards that you draw, all of them come down to a random dice roll of varying difficulties. Roll this amount of dice, hope that you get this many successes. And it is so random as to whether you're going to succeed or not. And it can totally screw over another player. 2 of the players in one of the games, the first game that we played, were continually getting cards that had a very low threshold for success. Whereas the third player in the game was getting the ones that constantly needed a high number of hits on the dice. And he just was swamped. There was no way that he could win by a very early point. And even if you do very well, and even if you do very well in the beginning, you accrue a lot of resources, you're doing well. It is so easy to just get devastated, either by poor rolls, or you just go on a streak of having poor rolls and nothing is happening for you. Or you're rolling the dice and you're just not moving the amount of spaces you need to get anywhere. And you end up, it's like the game kind of forces you into this weird decision where you're trying to go from point A to point B, whatever that might be. And when you roll the dice and figure out that you don't have enough movement to get anywhere close to there, you're kind of like, well, but if I go, like, let's say you have you need 3 movement to get where you're going, and you roll 2 movement, you could go to another spot and hope that you get resources, but that takes you away from where you need to go, so it's just setting you back, but you need resources anyways. I mean, you need so many resources in this game, and they constantly go back and forth by getting screwed by these different rolls, on top of the fact that there are the bonus cards in the game, which could easily just screw over another player. You can make a player lose their turn. I hate that. I hate that mechanism where you make someone lose a turn. You can just take resources from them. one player can, it's like the most awkward catch-up mechanism ever. There's at least one card that lets you just gain the amount of resources that the player in second place has. Some weird thing. Oh, man. It's just so hard to feel like you're doing anything, and then when you are doing something, it's so easy to just get knocked down. And this all ties back to the game length. Because of that, it can be very, very difficult for anyone to actually finish this game. That's why it takes forever, because you're constantly going back and forth. And, you know, of course, there also is the hoarding problem, because if you do really, really well, then you may stall at a certain point and you're not able to finish the game, but you have so much of everything that the other players are just desperately trying to play catch up, and it's just a matter of time. It's inevitable that the one player will win. So it kind of fails on all counts in that regard. Some of the mechanics are kind of weird. How the river travel works, man, I don't know. Here's a big pet peeve of mine. I really enjoy when people actually have something that differentiates themselves from the other players at the table, whether it's a character with a special power, or you just have access to a certain tech or equipment or something that actually makes you feel unique and distinct from the other players. This is the opposite of that, and they had such a great opportunity to do that, because at the beginning of the game, you choose who like your main survivor person is, and it could be like a doctor, a nurse, it was like a military guy. These different character roles, which are pretty generic, okay, but whatever, but they're distinct. And the only difference between them is some of your starting resources. Like the nurse and the doctor have like a med kit, and the others don't. But why? But then that's it. Like for the rest of the game, you're completely the same as everyone else. And that's it. Why not give them some sort of special power? Like you might be able to, if you're a doctor or nurse, you can heal. If you're the sergeant, you get to like re-roll dice. There's just so many wasted opportunities there. And it's a shame because, like I said, the components and the theme are solid, but the mechanics just don't live up to that. And it's sad to say, but I think that this definitely should have been given more playtesting with more people who are... I mean, I don't know. I don't want to speak about what playtesting they did, because maybe they did playtest it with a lot of people that did like it or whatever. Maybe they didn't listen to people's advice. But for me, this is just too much of a random dice fest. This is the kind of game that I think would have cut it 15, 20 years ago, but not now. I've played too many games that might have a lot of random dice chucking, but so many different things, fun things to mitigate it, special player powers, things like that, that you don't really notice. I'm thinking like King of Tokyo here. This and especially King of Tokyo can be fast. Sometimes it's long, sometimes it's fast. This game for a random dice chucker is very, very long. So unfortunately, I cannot recommend Doom and Bloom Survival. My name is Nick, this has been Board Game Brawl, and I'm reminding you to get out there and game every day and in every way. Take care.